I noticed her marching across the street from my new home on Maple Ridge Court before the moving truck had even left street. After spotting a code violation from space, Patricia Brennan, the president of the Maple Ridge HOA, took decisive action. Before she even got to my driveway, she was shaking her head and her clipboard was bouncing against her hip with every forceful stride. "I must record your moving car," she declared without even saying hello or welcome to the neighborhood. "Our regulations expressly prohibit commercial vehicles from staying on residential land for longer than 30 minutes. Yet the truck has been parked here for 47 minutes. As the movers carried boxes into my new house, I watched her scrawl frantically on her clipboard. I met Patricia Brennan and the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association through this. "My name is David Fletcher, and I recently sold my city property management business to buy this 4-bedroom colonial. I was hoping to live a more tranquil life at 38 and manage my remaining commercial assets from a distance. Being the public enemy number one of AHOA president, who seemed to have nothing better to do than use a ruler to measure the height of the grass, was something I didn't anticipate." The following morning, a bright orange envelope containing the first formal violation notice was affixed on my front door. Trash receptacles are not placed correctly. A $50 fine was applied. It read, "My bins were at the curb 12 hours prior." To the authorized window, Patricia had kindly added time-stamped pictures that she had taken the night before at 11 p.m. that afternoon. I received my second notice, which cited me for making unauthorized external changes by hanging a bird feeder without completing the required architectural review form. At the conclusion of my first week, I had accrued $300 in fines and been sent a stern letter regarding the unapproved white color on my garage door trim. As I observed from the window of my home office, Patricia had actually brought paint swatches to test against my house in the bright sunshine. She used her phone to take pictures of each comparison while holding several whites up to my trim for 20 minutes. Every Tuesday at 7 p.m., the HOA meetings were conducted at what they termed the community center, which was actually simply a repurposed storefront in the tiny shopping plaza at the entrance to the area. I made the decision to go to my first meeting in order to discuss these absurd discoveries. Patricia was seated at the head of a folding table with her 2 vice presidents at her sides, nodding in unison with her every word. She really pretended not to see me for 5 complete minutes before acknowledging my existence when I raised my hand during the open forum. "You haven't been here long enough to be eligible to speak at our meetings, Mr. Fletcher," she added with apparent contempt. "Before being granted such privilege, you must prove compliance for 90 days. No one raised their voice, but the other occupants shifted uneasily on their metal chairs. As Patricia's stare traveled across the room, daring anyone to question her authority, I could see the terror in their eyes. Patricia was unaware that I had worked in commercial real estate for the previous 15 years. In addition to owning a number of properties across the state, I also maintained a modest portfolio of retail establishments as investments for passive income. That weekend, I was sorting my files when I came across something fascinating that made me laugh aloud at my home office. In my filing cabinet, I found the lease for Suite B in the Maple Ridge Shopping Center. The Maple Ridge Homeowners Association was the listed tenant, and they had been renting for Summit Property Holdings, LLC, my business, for the previous 8 years. Their lease was due for renewal in precisely 60 days, and the rent was $2,500 per month. At the bottom of each yearly renewal was Patricia Brennan's signature. I documented every single harassment method Patricia used throughout the course of the following week. 6 times a day, she had her husband Carl drive by my house to take pictures. She used a real ruler to measure my lawn and wrote that the grass was 1/4 inch higher than allowed. She even reported that my home office might be breaking residential zoning restrictions to the city over the phone. I meticulously documented every occurrence in my notebook, including the dates, hours, and names of the witnesses. I got to the HOA meeting the next Tuesday 30 minutes early and waited in my car. Although she was unaware of it, I watched Patricia open the door to their office, which was the identical space they had hired for me. She arranged her documents at the head table, turned on the lights, and got ready to use her meager influence on the neighborhood once more. She was unaware of the certified note I had pinned to the door precisely 9 minutes before to the start of the meeting. Patricia opened the meeting by revealing new infractions she had found and reading the minutes from the previous week. Her husband Carl arrived late with the envelope I had left, just as she was ready to propose a new rule regarding mailbox decorations. In 10 seconds, her face changed from bewildered to pale to blazing red as he muttered something in her ear. Her chair tumbled backward with a thud that reverberated throughout the room as she got to her feet so quickly. "This is against the law," she yelled, gesturing with the paper. "You can't treat us like this. The Homeowners Association is who we are. We are entitled to certain rights." Calmly, I got to my feet and grinned. "As the owner of Summit Property Holdings, I can actually decide not to extend your lease, Patricia. My 60-day notice period goes beyond what is specified in our contract. Unless you want to talk about new terminology, of course." As locals attempted to comprehend what was happening, the room erupted in perplexed whispers. As Patricia stood there opening and closing her mouth like a fish out of water, her vice presidents exchanged terrified glances. When someone inquired about what was happening, I was pleased to provide an explanation. "Since the day I moved here, your HOA president has been bothering me. She was unaware that your HOA office is housed in a building that I own, the same workplace where you are currently seated." Patricia's voice cracked as she spoke, despite her best efforts to restrain herself. "This is extortion. Blackmail is what this is. I'm going to sue you for all you own." I displayed my documentation to the room and took out my phone. "In fact, Patricia, I have proof that you measured my grass with a ruler, took pictures of my property at 11 p.m., and submitted fictitious reports to the city. If you want to negotiate a new lease at, say, 3 times the present rate, I'm willing to overlook all of that, but it seems more like harassment to me." Aside from the hum of the fluorescent lights above, the room fell silent. Patricia's hands were shaking as she held on to the edge of the table, and her face had taken on a frightening hue of crimson. "Triple," she muttered, as if the word were causing her actual pain. "That amounts to $30,000 annually for this small office." Even though we both knew there were no other business establishments within 5 miles of the neighborhood, I shrugged and told her that she could always find another place. The next thing that transpired exceeded my expectations. Janet, a peaceful inhabitant who lived 3 homes down from me, abruptly got to her feet. I proposed calling for an emergency vote to remove our current HOA president from office. 4 distinct individuals promptly seconded the motion. Patricia said that they were all ungrateful traitors, that they couldn't accomplish this, and that she had created this HOA from nothing. That's where the vote took place. 23 locals decided to remove Patricia off the board in spite of her protests. The only people who voted to keep her were her husband Carl and her 2 vice presidents. When the results were revealed, she had a hilarious expression that combined shock, anger, and total incredulity. With the exception of Patricia's family, of course, she stood still as Janet was unanimously chosen as the next president. However, the night was far from ended. Janet's first move as president was to nullify all of Patricia's fines from the previous 30 days. While they were being reviewed, the $300 in penalties Patricia had imposed on me were promptly revoked, along with dozens of other false infractions she had made up then. Janet went to me and asked if, in exchange for their pledge to manage things equitably, I would think about maintaining the HOA office's present lease terms. Patricia had reached her breaking point. Her clipboard, which she had used to frighten the neighbors, clattered against the wall as she tossed it across the room. "All of you will regret this." She pointed at everyone in the room as she screamed. "I am aware of some facts about each of you. I have years' worth of documentation of every infraction." When her husband attempted to comfort her, she pushed him away and carried on with her tantrum. I then shared the last bit of knowledge I had been keeping. I calmly told Patricia that it is a breach of fiduciary duty to use HOA resources for personal vendettas. The state takes it very seriously, particularly in cases where harassment and selective enforcement are evident. My paperwork has already been sent to a lawyer that focuses on HOA law. In a split second, her face turned from purple to white. She was fully aware of that meaning. Board members may be held personally responsible for damages and legal costs if they violate their fiduciary duties. According to the lawyer I spoke with, the possible fines and court fees might potentially total $50,000 or more. Patricia tripped and fell backward, toppling a pile of infraction letters she had prepared for the gathering. As Patricia Brennan, the fear of Maple Ridge, disintegrated before their eyes, the crowd stared in startled silence. Carl followed her as she staggered toward the door, still struggling to comprehend what had just transpired, and muttered something about needing her lawyer. She looked around again as she got to the exit, tears of humiliation and wrath welling up in her eyes. 3 weeks later, Patricia received a lawsuit alleging harassment and selective enforcement from 7 separate homes. She would have to pay $35,000 in legal fees alone, and the judge further mandated that she compensate the impacted residents with an additional $40,000 as the verdict was read. She stood in the courtroom, her face a mask of total defeat, her hands shaking.